eBay is constantly changing its platform, making tiny improvements along the way that most of us don't even notice. But once in a while, you'll see some slight difference. And I think it's good to look into it and to kind of figure out, why would eBay do that? I believe that helps build your knowledge of the overall system. I think it helps your critical thinking when it comes to making decisions on eBay, and it's just a good exercise for sellers to know as much about this platform as possible. Recently, eBay made a minor change when it came to shipping whenever we enter the package sizes. And here's what we see now. When you get to the shipping section, you may or may not see a format similar to this on a computer. Now, on a cell phone, it'll be different. I strongly advise you not to do complete listings on your cell phone. I know I say that till I'm blue in the face, but there are just too many opportunities to make little errors, to punch the wrong key or to see the wrong option or not read something that you should have, and your listings are more likely to come out with an error more often than not on a cell phone if you create the listings and do the descriptions and all of that on a cell phone versus at least finish the listing on a computer. You can start it on a cell phone, take the photos or whatever, but you should finish on a web browser, a tablet, computer, something like that. Accuracy is really important here. If you make a mistake and say an item is 4 inches as opposed to 40, your buyer is not going to like whatever he or she gets. I know that's a little extreme, but whenever you misstate something about an item, the buyer could expect that, not get it, return it, and file a return as an INAD, which goes against you, item not as described. Or worse, the buyer will go, 40 inches, this thing's only like 4 inches, I don't know why they say 40. Now, I would think in that case the buyer might think, well, they probably have a typo, but not always. Sometimes they just move on to something else because they don't want to risk, I really want to make sure I'm getting what I'm wanting to get. And I think because of accuracy, you should do all listings on a computer, on a web browser, tablet, something like that, or at least finish and review them on a computer or web browser. But back to the change that was made recently. Depending on how your screen goes, you may see a shipping section that looks like this, especially if you're fairly new to eBay, or you may, if you use eBay's shipping policy, you'll see a different format. But what's big here is that eBay started allowing decimal points on the box sizes. They didn't do that before. Now, I don't know how long they've been doing this. I haven't really paid attention, but I just noticed it a couple of weeks ago and thought, that's odd. And then I thought, no, that's brilliant of eBay. Now let's think this through. Why would eBay do that? A lot of sellers underestimate their box sizes. First of all, on a box, whenever you have a box that says 8 by 4 by 4, that means 8 inches by 4 by 4 inches on the inside of the box, not on the outside. That's critical. Now, why in the world would a box maker do that? Well, that's the only way they can do it. They can't give you outside dimensions. They have to tell you what will fit in this box. And if the box is a 1/4 inch box or a very thick box, maybe 3/8 of an inch, the outside measurements of the box might be an extra inch all the way around, but they have to sell a box based on what the maximum it can hold. So an 8 by 4 box, for example, will hold exactly 8 inches by 4 inches on the inside. Therefore, sometimes you can go over your shipping size, and usually it doesn't matter. For most people who sell on eBay, you're selling things that are not oversized. But once in a while, you're going to sell something that's fairly long or fairly large, and just an extra inch is going to push that into oversized territory, which means you're going to get charged more for shipping it. You don't want to surprise yourself with this. You don't want to say that it was right under the oversized measurements, and then it turns out because of your box thickness and you thought the measurements meant the outside of the box, you actually were off by an inch on all the dimensions, and that's going to hurt you. It's going to put you in oversized. Now, the buyer's already paid shipping. You can't go to the buyer and say, hey, I made a mistake. It's going to cost more. Send me more money. You have to come up with the money yourself. You have to pay more than the buyer paid if you're in oversized territory because you didn't do the dimensions right. Now, used to, when eBay would only take whole number dimensions, of course, it won't even let me tab over. It insists on keeping 0.0, and that's fine. But used to, it would only allow 13 by 4 by 3 or something like that. Now, if your box were 3 by 5 or 13 and a half or 13.75 by something, a lot will just put 13 in that first number. A lot, if the box is 4.5, will just put 4. They round down. They don't know better. The box says it's 4 and it happens to be 4.5. I don't understand that, but well, we know it's because it's the outside measurements, but the box says 4, so I guess it's 4. No, you're going to make a mistake once in a while whenever you go push yourself into oversized territory. It's going to cost you more to ship that, but your buyer was only charged less because your dimensions were wrong to begin with. What you should do and what I've always told you to do is to round up. If the box is 4.5, always say 5. Now, but FedEx officially said, I don't know how long it's been, but it hasn't been that long. They officially said, we always want you to round up or we will charge you if there's a cost difference to mail your size of a box. So used to people and new eBayers, they'll just round down. They don't know better. But whenever eBay allows this decimal point, this does some things that can help those ignorant. I don't mean that badly. They just don't know better. They're ignorant of all of this about box sizes and dimensions and rounding up versus rounding down. Whenever there are decimal points, if the box measures 13.3 inches, the seller might enter 13.3. eBay will treat that as 14. And so you won't be in trouble. Now before, if you were a fairly new eBayer, you just didn't know, and it's 13.3, that's closer to 13 than 14, so I'm just going to put 13. Then when it comes to international shipping, eBay doesn't want us to get our international shipping sizes wrong if we use eBay International Shipping, because that makes eBay have to pay more. If we say, eBay, we're going to send you a 12 by 12 by 12 box, and it's international shipping, but it turns out to be a 12 by 13 by 13 box, that costs more to ship for eBay overseas. That extra inch on that one dimension costs money, and over time it's going to be a lot of money. So eBay, by allowing the decimal points to allow real numbers as opposed to whole number integers, a whole number integer is a number without a decimal point, you can throw that out at the next cocktail party you'll attend, and they'll just think you're a mathematical genius. But this way, now, for most of us, don't mess with points. If you measure it and it's a little bit over 13, just type 14. Just type 5 if it's a little over 4. Just always round up and you will be safe. Now remember, what we are doing is listing an item, not shipping it. So we might actually wrap this and it turns out to be a little smaller or a little larger. Well, that's just the luck of the draw. Not that I believe in luck, I do believe in chance. But if you're off whenever you do the shipping label a little bit, sometimes it costs you a little more, sometimes a little less, just because your overall estimates were wrong. That's okay, that'll work itself out. But this is when you're listing an item, you're going to see those decimal points all of a sudden. Maybe you've seen them and haven't paid attention, but it allows us to discuss this about box sizes that can be critical. Whenever you become a full-time eBayer, whenever you really start making a lot of money, or when you become a part-time eBayer who makes a lot of money, then shipping really matters. If you're oversized on accident 5 times a month, that in a year is going to be 60 extra fees that you're paying that you wouldn't have had to had you done your measurements right. So I believe that these real decimal point numbers allow most sellers to get dimensions correct without having to even know they should round up.